we have to make a huge paradigm shift. This is going to be hard to do for you and others. I mean, I'm really going out on a limb here and asking a lot of you. But in the spirit of happy wife, happy life. Some of you are probably sick of that cliche, but it is so true. Because when she's all pissed off, unless you're just gone at work or you've taken off and shut down somewhere, it's like a dark cloud hanging over. It's worse than a dark cloud hanging over your head. It's a dark cloud that's raining on you and striking you in the ass with lightning. So in the spirit of keeping the peace, we have to make this shift from I'm going to listen to mount a defense because I know I'm right and she's wrong, over to I'm going to listen to understand her perspective. And this is going to take practice, and you're going to flub it up, and you don't beat up on yourself when you flub it up. You just go, okay, well, I got all passionate again, and I know I'm right, and her opinion is just basically dumb. I can't even believe she believes that. But now I got to go back to the blackboard and try again. And that's fine. There's going to be a lot of trying again, a lot of fail, try, fail, try, fail. That's the way it's supposed to go. That's the way it will go. You practice. Here it is again. Now, I'm not talking about every conversation, the weather, sports, the stuff that you're really adamant about. There needs to be a little trigger goes off in your head. Okay, this is a hot topic for me, and this is where I usually go nuclear and insist that my way is the only way. So what I'm going to do instead, to reduce my relationship stress, I'm not even doing this for her, is I'm going to listen instead of thinking about what I'm getting ready to say so I can mount a very factual, smart defense. I'm going to now listen to understand. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to look in her direction. I'm going to nod while she's talking. I'm going to tactfully stop her periodically before she goes on too long, because I want to paraphrase back what she said. And if she gets on to point 2 and 3 in her message delivery, I may forget what point 1 was. So when she gets on to point number 2 or 3, I'm going to say, would you mind if I check and make sure I got it so far? So what I understand you're saying is blah, 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 blah. And you're going to paraphrase, not parrot back. You're going to paraphrase back. She might say, no, that's not what I mean. You can say, well, would you mind trying again with slightly different wordage? She'll try it again. You'll get it the first or second time out. You'll say, so what you're saying is blah, blah, blah. She's going to say, yes, that's what I mean. That proves understanding. If you can paraphrase back what she said and she goes, yes, that's what I mean, that by default proves understanding. If you're more interested in keeping the peace than making a point, then while she's talking, have the thought, I'm listening to understand, and I'm going to paraphrase this back here in a minute. Versus, I'm listening, but not really. I'm thinking about how I'm going to come back and mount a defense. You have to make that shift. He feels unsafe and insecure in the relationship. This causes anxiety. He tries to reduce his anxiety. His anxiety reduction techniques cause relationship problems. And the relationship problems raise his anxiety, and then he feels even more unsafe. So the whole point of this little conversation here is, at any point along the trajectory there could be some type of intervention. Anxiety is the first thing that happens. So he can find anxiety reduction methods, some of which will not work for everybody. You know, something that may work for this guy won't work for this guy, but there are a ton of anxiety reduction strategies. So if you tackle that first thing, the anxiety, and he finds some anxiety reduction strategies, now he's not engaged in some of the more dysfunctional anxiety reduction attempts that cause relationship problems. So now you've intervened at the very front and tackled the second and third step in the sequence. So if the relationship problems are greatly reduced, then she doesn't have to have the talk as much. So now his anxiety is not increased as much. And so the cycle doesn't start over as frequently. And then when it does, it's not as severe. That's the big goal. That's usually what happens when everybody's working the program, is this cycle occurs less frequently, and then even when it does, It's less intense and problematic and lingers not quite as long as it did back in the day. He has the ability to change. I'm going on record as saying that. He has the ability to change. It's not a question of whether he has the ability or not. The big question is willingness and motivation. That's the problem, the lack of motivation and willingness. If we can get that piece off and launched, where he is willing, he is motivated, he's an eager beaver, he's willing to be a student, he's willing to be moldable, like clay on a potter's wheel, then there's all kinds of hope all over the place. But to get to that point is, if he gets to that point, I hate to say it, he would be in the minority rather than in the majority, because the majority of guys may not even believe that they have it, or if they have it, they may think it's not very severe, or if they think they have it and it's severe, they will oftentimes come to counseling just for show, just to get you off of his back and put on a good front and pretend. I run into the full gamut of stuff. I'm only telling you what you need to be thinking about. Probably only 20% of the men that I work with do those four things. Yes, I have it. Yes, it's causing a problem. Yes, I want to change it. Tell me what I need to do. Sign me up. I'm all in. To find that guy right there is rare. And sometimes I'm not suggesting that you go nuclear or play hardball necessarily today. Since we're looking at some hard truth and stuff that's hard to hear, sometimes he won't get motivated until he's almost convinced that he's going to lose you. Because remember, I said a little bit ago, he's going to have a hard time living independently. To just be a bachelor and wing it on his own, at a few significant levels, he wouldn't make it. He might make it financially, and he might make it to the point where he can function fairly normally, but from an emotional standpoint, most guys, when they on the spectrum, when they do get divorced and then they are on their own, they really have a hard time dealing with life, and their depression and anxiety skyrocket. And wherever there's anxiety, depression is not far behind. Because being under high anxiety, even worse than he is now, will result in some depression at some point. And now you got two things to deal with. This is not a stagnant disorder, by the way. Some of you who are familiar with the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, it's always in revision. Asperger's syndrome is no longer in there. Manic depression no longer in there. They've done away with ADD. So, and it's not because they're necessarily changing their mind about things, but we evolve over time. Information on Asperger's syndrome, for example, which its first entry in the DSM was in '94. A lot of things have changed since that time. There's better diagnostic tools. There's better intervention strategies, better therapy. There's not as much stigma involved. And that's just the short list of how a disorder can change or become eliminated. With ASD level 1, you have a ton of strengths. We can also say that some of these strengths cause problems. For example, you'll be able to relate to some of this, if not all of this. If your spouse has ASD level 1, he probably thinks critically. He has high expectations, especially in his field of interest. He can be very self-critical. You may not have noticed that in him because it's probably hidden and it operates at a very unconscious level. But most guys, we're talking about guys on the autism, they're very critical of themselves and they have very low self-esteem, in large part because of childhood issues. They also can evaluate others. At face value, especially if you're not a neurotypical wife, you might think, oh, those are great skills. Problems, though, that come with that package is he can be critical and intolerant of others, and he may become discouraged or depressed very easily, and he is often perfectionistic, which In some cases, that's a good thing, and too many cases, it's not. Another strength would be he may have a large vocabulary, and he may have a broad base of knowledge in a particular area, and that sounds great, right? But he also may use words to escape or avoid situations. He may present as someone who's a little on the ADHD side because he will become bored very easily. If it's anything outside of his special interest, you come along, want to talk about the pretty rose bush in your backyard, he's zoned out. Probably doesn't even know that he's zoned out. Some people may view him as a know-it-all. He's an engineer, he's a know-it-all, very rigid, so sometimes they get stereotyped. Another strength would be he can concentrate very intensely for long periods of time. Long attention span in his area of interest. Very persistent, very goal-directed behavior. You might, oh, that's great. Well, not so much for you, because now he's going to resist interruptions. He's going to neglect certain duties that you probably need him to do. He's not going to be very adept at focusing on stuff that falls out of his special interest, and he may just come off to you as just being very stubborn. His agenda is his agenda, and your agenda is not involved. Another strength would be he will have a very inquisitive attitude. He will have a lot of intellectual curiosity. He will be intrinsically motivated. In other words, there's something that he wants to do. He won't need any outside moral support to get it done. He's self-motivated in that regard. Sounds great, right? Possible problems is he asks a lot of questions, sometimes embarrassing questions. He can be very strong-willed. He may resist your direction or your input or your attempt to be a good influence. Another one that we've mentioned probably in this group is he's definitely very autonomous. He prefers individual work. He's very reliant, self-reliant. It's a great skill, except with you. So the problem that comes with that package is he has probably often rejected your input. Another strength would be periods of intense effort. For example, I'll make something up off the top of my head. He has a project at work that maybe falls into his area of special interest, and you have a spouse who works overtime. He has a regular 8 to 5 job. He doesn't get home till 8. And by the time he gets home, he's so burnt out, he's got nothing left for any kind of socializing or emotional connection. He will tend to enjoy organizing things. He's great at systematizing. He's great at thinking in pictures. That's great. Problem that comes with that package, though, he constructs complicated rules or systems in his head that he has not articulated to you because he hasn't really identified them either. He just knows that they operate at an unconscious level. He will have some hidden rules on what is acceptable to him and what is not. He won't even be able to put his finger on it. He just knows when you violate one of those rules. And to you, that may come off as he's very bossy, rude, domineering, and so on. Probably mention one more strength, and that is the ability to conceptualize and synthesize. This is perhaps the indication of a very logical brain that can think mathematically. He probably enjoys problem solving and intellectual activity. Unfortunately, that's not a social or emotional activity. The problem with that particular strength is he may reject details that you see that he doesn't. He may omit details that are in plain view for you, but he doesn't see them. And he will often tend to question your instructions or your directives. You will have a clear idea of how something should be done. And when you say, we need to do it this way, and then you get grilled because he doesn't fully understand it. I probably should mention weak central coherence too, because this is the inability to generalize and see the big picture. It's great that he can be hyper-focused on one aspect of something. That can come in very handy sometimes for real. We probably wouldn't have some of the technology and the engineering and computer programs and whatnot if that didn't happen. But if you hyper-focus on one detail to the exclusion of seeing the global gestalt picture, then you can imagine the difficulties there. So traits of weak central coherence, I haven't talked about that in this group because I usually don't use that fancy term. I just say that they have a hard time seeing the big picture. If your ASD spouse has weak central coherence, he will hate to have his routine interrupted, and he will hate to have his structure changed. He dislikes disruption. If he's hyper-focused on this thing and you come in and you try to get him to stop what he's doing and switch over to something that falls not even in the ballpark with his special interest, you may have run into some pushback. Also with weak central coherence, he's going to have a very strong need for structure. It's not a want, it's a need. And when that structure gets violated, you've gotten pushback and probably didn't even know what was happening. He's going to have the ability to hyper-focus on one activity for lengthy periods of time. He's going to put a lot of attention to parts of objects. He's going to have difficulty with sudden change. He's going to insist on things remaining the same. In some cases, he may have some savant skills. I wouldn't say I run into that a lot, but some of these guys with ASD level 1, they're so smart in a particular area that they are light years ahead of any neurotypical male brain on that same subject. The number one thing that gets in the way with you having a relatively stress-free relationship with her, the NT wife, is your anxiety. So we're thinking in terms of how to we're going to reverse engineer. You want to improve the relationship with her. You're here. You wouldn't be here if that wasn't something that was somewhat important to you. Have to reduce your anxiety before that's going to happen, though. What do you have to do before you reduce your anxiety? You're going to have to relax. What are you going to have to do before you relax? You're going to have to slow your mind down and your body down. There's this mind-body connection, as I'm sure you know, and one can lead the other and one can follow the other. In high anxiety moments, you'll have to slow your body down before your mind will slow down. In high anxiety moments, the mind can't slow itself down, but it'll follow the body if you slow your body down. So in order to relax, you have to slow your mind down and you have to slow your body down. What do you have to do before you can slow your mind down? You're going to have to do some breath work. I recommend 5 minutes a few times a day, preferably 5 minutes 3 times a day, where you're going to go somewhere and shut your brain off and be away from people and things and environmental stimuli. And I'm just going to focus on my in-breath and out-breath for 5 minutes. And with each out-breath, I'm going to also focus on relaxing my muscles. I'm going to in-breath, I'm going to exhale, and just kind of sink into my seat. So there's the breath work, and then there is on my exhale, I'm going to focus on reducing the tension in my muscles. And that will slow the body down. And the other way I want you to begin slowing your body down is just move more slowly. Get up more slowly, sit down more slowly, walk more slowly, talk more slowly, drive more slowly. Literally force yourself to behave like a 95-year-old man. Slow your ass down. Till you do all that stuff there that I just laid out, you're never going to get, we just reverse engineered. I want to have a better relationship with her. Well, isn't this a hell of a note? In order to have a better relationship with her, I have to take 5 minutes 3 times a day and focus on breath and muscle tension and physically slow all my talking and movements down? Yes, you got it. Bingo. Because until you fix that anxiety piece, no, you're not getting anywhere. I'll take bets. I'll put my money where my mouth is.